Welcome to Handmade Happenings. I'm Marissa and my dollhouse study needs a fireplace. So today I'm showing you how to make one. So I started by measuring the space where this fireplace is going to go just so I knew the absolute maximum height, width, and depth that I could go. I then took this plastic or acrylic, I'm not actually sure what it is, piece that I had pulled from an old doll room. And this is going to be the front of the fireplace. So since I can't cut it, I know that the fireplace width cannot be any narrower than that. And obviously I can't really make it bigger, so then the height of the opening of the fireplace can't be any larger than the piece. So that's why I need those measurements. If you're making this, then you can either use plastic from like packaging, like the clear plastic, or just leave the fireplace open like a regular fireplace instead of like one with an insert. With all of those measurements taken, I drew a sketch of kind of the rough idea of how tall I wanted certain parts and how wide, and translated that into measurements for all of the pieces. And I know looking at this, it probably doesn't make sense to anyone but me, but don't worry, I am going to break it down into more cohesive explanation. With all of the calculations figured up, it's time to start cutting out pieces. And I have all the pieces that are needed if you are following along with me on screen, and they will also be listed in the description with all of the measurements. So cut all of these out. I use foam board because I find that to be the easiest. You can use recycled cardboard. Just be aware of the thickness of your cardboard. The foam board that I use was 1/4 inch thick. If there's a slight variation and it's smaller, it really shouldn't affect it. The mantle as well as the top and bottom of the base may hang out a little more, but it shouldn't be a big deal. Now, if your cardboard is thicker, you are going to want to cut all three of those pieces a little wider and a little deeper to compensate for that. So I recommend cutting all the pieces out at once and labeling them so that you can keep them all straight. Up next, you're going to start assembling the base of this fireplace. So I use hot glue, and you're going to start by gluing the base bottom to the bottom of the back piece. Next, you're going to glue in the base side pieces so that they keep that right angle on the bottom and back pieces. Then glue the base front piece onto the front of that. Next, you're going to take your base top piece and cover it with paper. I used an ivory paper, but if you can find like a marble paper, that would be ideal. And of course, if you don't want to have the contrast, then you could also just paint it. But either way, don't glue it down yet. Next, take your front piece, cut out a rectangle from it, making sure that rectangle is centered. Mine was 3 1/4 inches tall and about 5 inches wide, more or less. Again, you just want it centered and fairly large. Mine was based on the shape of the acrylic piece that I was putting inside of it. But of course, if you're using clear packaging, then it could depend according to the size that you can cut out. And if you're just leaving it open, then you have a lot more flexibility for how to do it. So you want to mark the height of where the mantle is going to end up. And I did that by stacking the base top piece, the mantle piece, and then the front piece onto the back piece above the rest of the base pieces, and drawing a line right there where it ends to mark that location. Glue the side pieces to the front piece, and this is where I glued in the acrylic piece as well, because it acted as a bit of a brace to hold those side pieces up. If you're just using clear plastic, then I would recommend cutting small squares of foam board and using them as a brace, similar to how the base side pieces held the base bottom piece and the back piece at that right angle. And I would also recommend waiting to glue the plastic in until after everything is painted, because then you don't have to worry about getting paint on your plastic. Then glue the mantle on top. And now it's time to add texture to the fireplace. And I'm doing a stone fireplace, so I used a technique from my Foggy Stuff, which uses hot glue and places kind of uneven globs of glue all over to give that stone look. Now this hot glue trick is going to take a lot of hot glue. It also can be very hard on your hand because of squeezing the trigger a lot. So if you're not wanting to do that, or you just don't want the look of a stone fireplace, you do have a couple of other options. You could use more foam board to create strips of almost like molding and just leave the whole thing white. Or you could use the same trick that I used in my Dollhouse front porch video, where I used egg cartons to create a brick texture. So I did this on the front and sides, as well as on the front and sides of the base and on the back piece. Do not do this on the mantle or below that line that we marked earlier on the back. Up next is painting, and I just started with a dark gray base coat. Make sure to cover all of the sides. Basically, I painted everything except for like the inside of any pieces and the back and bottom. And after the gray dried, I mixed up a lighter shade of gray and ran that kind of in between all of the stones. I'm trying to add texture here. And then I also selectively dry brushed stones with black, white, and brown paint. And lastly, I went over everything again with gray because some of that dry brushing just came on a little too strong. So if I looked at it and saw a piece that like had just too much brown on it, I just went over it with gray again to return it to more of a base state and to tone down some of those browns and blacks and whites that had gotten into it. I am adding battery operated lights to this fireplace. So I'm taking the base top piece and cutting a notch in the back so that the lights can be threaded up into the fireplace. And then the battery pack is going to be hidden in the base. So take that base top piece and cut along the long edge 1 3/4 inches from that front edge. And that's just going to make it so that piece can be removed to access the battery pack. Now, in the video you'll see the piece still attached, and that's because I was trying to use the paper as a hinge so that that piece would just flip up to access the battery pack but stay attached. Unfortunately, this resulted in the piece not laying flat. So just cut it off and leave it as a separate piece. It's easier. Now we're ready for the final assembly. So glue that base piece, the back piece of it, onto the base, and then glue the front piece on top of that. And I found it easiest to do this with the lights already in place. So when I glued the base piece on, I glued around those edges, didn't put any glue on that notch, made sure the lights were threaded up but out of the way of the glue, and glued it down. And then for the front piece, I found that the easiest way to do this was to pull all of those lights kind of up, because there was just more room, but like up and towards the center so that it wouldn't get caught in any of the glue. Then once all of the pieces were on, I pulled the battery pack towards the front where I could reach it and just adjusted the lights a little. Now you could leave it like this and have a very nice fireplace, but I did want to make this look like it had doors so that you could open the doors and put wood in it and it wasn't just like an electric fireplace. So to do that, I took popsicle sticks and I cut 4 of them at 3 1/4 inches tall. And that's the size of the height of the cutout from the front piece. I then lined all 4 of those up on top of that cutout and then measured the remaining part that was not covered. Took that number and divided it by 2. For me, that was 1 3/4 inches, but I would recommend doing this math on your own just in case it varies from the size of your popsicle sticks. Take whatever measurement you ended up with and cut 4 more popsicle sticks to that size. Paint all of these black and then glue them onto your plastic in the order that is shown on screen. Then to make handles, I took a floral wire or jewelry wire. I don't really remember what it actually is, but it's like craft wire that bends really easy. And bent a kind of spiral, or I think it ended up being more like a teardrop shape on one end, and trim it down. Do that twice and glue those onto those inside pieces that are like down the middle of the doors to be handles. And you're done. Now your dolls have a fireplace that they can curl up in front of during cold days and decorate for any season.